I just briefly wanted to respond to the allegation that was circulated by Premier Higgs that the Canadian government was going to force 4,600 asylum seekers on the province of New Brunswick. As many have known, and those who have been covering it know, we've been having some responsible discussions with my counterparts in immigration over the summer. Importantly, the civil services in both in the provinces and in Canada about what a fair distribution of asylum seekers would look like in a country like Canada, where every province and territory has a responsibility to take on asylum seekers, and in the context where Ontario and Quebec have been doing more than their fair share. So during the course of the summer, our teams have been working on models on what that would look like, and we came up with a set of facts and figures about what each province should be taking based on population weight. That means that some provinces should take on more to ease the pressure on provinces like Ontario and Quebec, notably. The allegations by Premier Higgs are largely fictitious. We at no times have said that we would impose asylum seekers on provinces without financial compensation. In fact, the indication I got from ministers in New Brunswick was that they didn't want asylum seekers with or without compensation. So I don't know for what reason the Premier is floating that number. Clearly there's a responsibility of provinces to take on asylum seekers to ease the pressure on their colleague provinces in Ontario and Quebec, and we expect provinces to follow suit. But in no circumstances will we be doing this without compensation or without consent from the provinces. Refugee and asylum as a theme is one that is shared by provinces jurisdictionally. We expect them to step up and provide the services. It doesn't come without compensation from the federal government, but it's something that we have to coordinate in a responsible way. And so that's been the efforts of the group that we've put together throughout the summer. And it's something that we'll continue to work on. In order to move forward, we have to put through numbers on the table on what an aspirational number of asylum seekers would look like in provinces that accept to bring asylum seekers in and ease the pressure from Quebec and Ontario. But again, we need consent and cooperation, importantly, logistically, from provinces to do their fair share. And we would expect a province like New Brunswick to do its part. But the last thing we want to see done is for this to be politicized.
And so that number was the aspirational number?
It's actually less than that, but it's a number that we would like to see based on the current number of asylum seekers coming into the country, largely spread out based on population share. That would relieve pressure from Quebec and Ontario. But again, we're talking about voluntary movement of people, and there will be a lot. We are looking at a number of incentives that would incentivize people to move to provinces that have less than their fair share. But again, we have a number of provinces, it's no surprise, that have no particular interest in taking asylum seekers. We have some where there is interest, but they also have questions with respect to financial compensation. It's a question of coordination in a federation where largely asylum seekers have been coming in. We have moved them federally into federally funded hotels. That's a model that not only doesn't work very well, it's highly expensive. So bringing the provinces in is an important part of being responsible as a federation. We would expect New Brunswick to be responsible and step up. That comment by the Premier was highly irresponsible.
So I just want to be clear, the number that he put forward in that tweet, is that higher or lower than what Ottawa voted?
I don't know where the number came from. I suspect it's a product of the population share that New Brunswick represents within Canada's total population, divided or spread out by the number of asylum seekers, generally on a trailing basis of ones that have come in over the last year. Some people, when they come into Canada, have a set idea of where they will establish. They have perhaps some support from community members. Some don't. And so part of the nuance in here has been looking at the asylum seekers that are the most in need. You've seen that highly covered by some of the challenges we have faced, particularly with the City of Toronto. But again, doing this in a responsible way for asylum seekers while they await their due process and a determination as to whether they're protected persons is something that requires provinces and territories to step up. We expect that to be the case, and we're looking at a model that does have sort of a carrot and stick incentive to it. And it's something that, again, it's highly irresponsible to go out and say something that actually isn't true. And were provinces to step up, there would be financial compensation.
What's the stick?
Well, it depends, Catherine, on what provinces want to do things and which ones don't. It's no surprise that provinces control right now 100,000 permanent residents in the provincial nominee program. That could be something we could take another look at were they not to accept asylum seekers. We are looking at a number of other incentives that would push provinces that are recalcitrant, but it's not something I'm going to negotiate publicly or even air out publicly. We have this working group. It's a new working group since the beginning of the summer. It's largely been cooperative. There are some provinces that are not participating, but we would expect full cooperation from all provinces.
I just want to understand, I mean, you're saying you require their consent, but you're also saying that you're willing to muscle up and kind of...
Well, look, we've never said anything of the sort. Well, look, right now we could open up a hotel in any particular province and ship people there. That's an option. We have been moving people around to relieve pressure from Ontario and Quebec. It's not a financially viable model. It's not an effective model, but it's one that needs some reform in order to make sure the provinces are stepping up, looking at what their labor force needs are, what the capacity is to help some of these folks as they wait the determination of their protected person status, and it's one where we actually need coordination with provinces. Most of the provinces are at the table talking to us about what these models would be. It's far from being complete, but again, there's only so far the federal government can actually be nice and say, please, please, we also have levers that we need to pull and push, and provinces do get the benefit from immigration. So it's something that we need to deal with in a responsible fashion, and we expect every single province to be responsible.
Quebec and Ontario are pretty compared to their other provinces, but they also have an infrastructure provinces. So what kind of runway or lead time are you thinking about, or is this task force thinking about restricting?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard the province of Quebec say there's a historical pressure on Quebec. There's some nuance in there when you look at the entire humanitarian envelope. There are some provinces that have been doing more on government-assisted refugees. Quebec has done less on that end. They have taken fewer Ukrainian people that are coming in here on a temporary basis to flee aggression from Russia. So there's a balance there that isn't completely summarized by how many asylum seekers have come through Roxham Road or at Trudeau Airport. But largely speaking, yes, Quebec and Ontario, while they have larger infrastructure, have larger pressure on that infrastructure, and people naturally have come to Pearson Airport and Trudeau Airport and gone to the large municipal centres like Montreal and Toronto. There's not a question of uprooting people and dragging them off into different parts of the country. So we've been looking at a consent-based model, a consensual model, whether it's consent from the province or consent from the individuals themselves, which is the most important, to be able to move people in a way that makes sense with the proper services that should be offered to them as they establish themselves in Canada or wait for their due process and determination from the Immigration and Refugee Board as to their status or not as protected persons. That's been largely less coordinated than it should. And it has put pressure, admittedly, on large city centres, on provinces like Quebec and Ontario. So that's work that's still in progress, Laura, and it's work that we'll continue to work on. We're not going to come to an ideal situation in a couple of weeks, but part of having mature discussions is, one, not to leak working documents among government officials, which is just dumb. And secondly, when we look at these documents, to have an open discussion about what they are, because we have to actually agree on a number that would be, in an ideal world, the proper repartition between provinces based on their population weight.
Do you have like an aspirational timeline to know what some of these aspirations?
Well, I think everyone wants this solved yesterday. It's not going to get solved yesterday, and that timeline, I think, would be too, over the course of the next 6 months to a year, putting something into place that is actually pretty new and actually could have a chance of success will be my focus. But I'm not naive enough to think that some provinces, for whatever reasons, particularly political in this case, would resist this. But that means, some probably more difficult conversations with provinces.